Good evening and welcome to the regular town council meeting of the city of Weaverville, Monday, July 24th, 2023. Council members, you've had an opportunity to review the agenda. Are there any adjustments to the agenda, or can I have a motion for approval of it?
Just one addition. I'm discussing the elections form.
Oh, okay.
You can add that.
Why don't you just go ahead and speak to that?
Just make everybody aware, Mayor and I talked about the possibility of, which more than a possibility now, of having in elections, for council elections, a forum for candidates to get questions and not a debate per se. And the Mayor looked into the possibility that we wanted to put that on the agenda to discuss, or we could discuss it right now, where the idea was to have an opportunity like that before the early voting, where all the candidates be a nonpartisan thing, just like our elections are. And you've had a conversation with League of Women Voters on that, right?
And they're supposed to get back to me, and they apparently some of this was already in the works actually before we had a great idea. Some of the candidates I think had the idea as well. So.
Okay. And apparently some we did in the town in the past, but it's been some years now.
So we'll work on getting that scheduled for the community centers in October if everyone's good with that. The League of Women Voters will be running it though. Thank you for adding that, Mr. McKenna. Any other adjustments to the agenda, or is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good deal. So it is the duty of the mayor and every town council member to avoid both conflicts of interest and the appearances of conflicts. Does any member have any known conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to any of the matters coming before this board this evening? I hear none, so that's good. Next item is the consent agenda. Town manager, would you go through the consent agenda items, please?
Certainly, and good evening to everyone. Beginning on page 3, you have the June 26 minutes for your approval. On page 6, beginning on page 6, you have the monthly tax report. We are at 99.95% as of the end of June. You will get a year-end settlement report next month, but for tonight's purposes, 99.95 is very good.
That's very good. So that's does that half a percentage represent one taxpayer?
And it's higher. It's don't know that. I don't know the answer to that, but it's actually better than most years.
Yes.
So
That's great.
we have done well.
Can we take a collection to put you over the top?
Sure. Starting here. Beginning on page 11, you have a budget amendment. This is for $44,646.92. This is for SRO, the SRO memorandum of understanding between Buncombe County Public Schools and the Weaverville Police Department. We did discuss this last month, so this is the budget amendment to go ahead and bring that money forward. On page 13 is proclamation recognizing September as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, and a draft proclamation back there on page 14. And then finally, on page 15, you have a road closure ordinance for Art and Autumn. This is scheduled for September 16th. The road closure will be 5 a.m. until 10 p.m. That is all of the consent agenda, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any questions or comments about the consent agenda? Seeing none, can we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Town manager, you're still up to bat.
Thank you, sir. Just a very quick manager's monthly update, Code Red implementation. We continue to have weekly staff meetings to get training on Code Red, and hope to have that pushed out to the public for enrollment next month, hopefully early next month. Recreation Ad Hoc Committee.
Could you maybe explain for the audience what
Yes,
Code Red is?
certainly. My apologies. Code Red is a public enrollment system whereby residents or the public in general can request enrollment for text messages, notifications, emails, voicemails, voice calls, that type of thing, in order to get important information from the town. Can be used for emergencies, obviously, is the big one, with the name fairly tailing there. Also, though, we can announce road closures, we can announce water line breaks, anything that might have an impact on residents or business owners. You'll be able to sign up for this in next month. So that will be starting soon. Recreation Ad Hoc Committee. Last month, we talked about creating an ad hoc committee to work with staff on the recreation complex down at Lake Louise. Thanks to Vice Mayor McKenna, who brought back some names for us. You see the members there, Earl Rohrbach, Stuart Brown, of course, Vice Mayor McKenna, Russ Kanner, and then staff members, Dale Pennell, Jennifer Jackson, Shelby Stovall, and myself. We have had our first meeting on that, and we'll be continuing those meetings to establish program rules and regulations for our pickleball courts as well as our multi-sports courts and other stages of the programming down there. Internship program, we're giving an internship program another shot. We tried this several years ago, didn't work out well, but thanks to our Assistant Chief Oberlin, she came up with a very good program whereby we could actually do some recruitment with this tool, and actually have an intern who is working with us, has started at this point, started working with us, and then hopes to attend basic law enforcement or BLET training after some period of time. But in the meantime, he is going to have the opportunity to be working with all of our departments at some capacity within reason of what we might expect from an intern. So we look forward to working with him. Interesting young man. He is bilingual, he's multilingual, I will say. English, Spanish, and I think French. Correct me if I'm wrong. Latin, excuse me. And so we're looking forward to having someone who is bilingual and can help us with instances where we need interpreter. So we're looking forward to getting that going. Again, thanks to Assistant Chief Oberlin for her initiative there. The solar project on the fire station is scheduled to begin by the end of this year. The delay is largely due to the permitting and inspections process, and also still some equipment supply chain issues. Once that work begins, the project is expected to only take about a week and a half to complete. Update on the Eller Cove watershed plans. As I reported to you in May, staff worked with the Southern Appalachian Conservancy to request another grant for $2,500 for signage to delineate around the boundaries of the actual watershed reservoir on Eller Cove watershed where we have the conservation easement. Unfortunately, we did not receive that grant, but we still continue to move forward. Staff has met and reviewed Mark Endry's draft management plan that was presented to you. We do have some changes to make to that, and have a meeting planned next week to meet with him again to continue working through that. I expect that this will be on Town Council's agenda for your discussion and potentially approval at next month's meeting. Finally, and it's unfortunate that we have to wish our own Shelby Stovall well, and wish her well as she's getting married and then moving away. And so we wish her all the best. She's done I wish she was here, and maybe we'll have her here at maybe next month's meeting. But she has done a fantastic job at our community center. As you all recall, she opened for us and has done a fantastic job, and has really made very positive impact on the community, as well as having done a really good job. So when you see Shelby, we will be planning a small reception event as a bon voyage to her, and to wish her well. Unfortunately, she's moving to Minnesota, and so it's probably not likely that many of us will get to go to visit with her, or would want to potentially. But she is getting married and moving to Minnesota, and so we wish her well on that. I am, by the way, already interviewing for that position. Got one interview this week. I've received several applications actually, and so hope to continue to have those interviews and have someone. My goal is to have someone in place before Shelby is gone. I don't know how well that goes, but we'll continue to keep you posted. That's all my manager report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. And just a creative recruitment strategy there, Chief Davis, so. And I just got to say that I get multiple compliments about Shelby Stover from the townspeople all the time, so she has done an outstanding job for us. Next item up is item 6, our general public comments, and let me read you the rules. Town Council appreciates the opportunity to hear from its residents, and is a part of each of its regular meetings is reserved for that purpose. The rules that Town Council has adopted for public comments will apply. General public comments may be submitted during the meeting or in writing in advance on any meeting topic or any other item of interest. And do we have any comments from written in? No. Normal rules of decorum apply to all comments, and duplicate comments are discouraged. Actions and behavior can be questioned, but personal attacks will not be tolerated. The general public comments section of the meeting will be limited to 20 minutes, and priority given to those commenters in attendance. Comments during the meeting are generally limited to 3 minutes. That covers the bulk of it. And our first speaker tonight.
Good.
Our first speaker tonight is David King.
My name is David King. I'm a resident of the Maple Trace subdivision and also an HOA board member. I have a small statement I'd like to read. And I want to first thank Mr. Mayor, council members, for hearing our request for annexation of the Maple Trace subdivision. I'd also like to thank town staff members, Jennifer Jackson, James Eller, and Dale for their professionalism, guidance, help, and kindness through our as a community, putting this together. Per our annexation petition, we are asking to be annexed into the town, and our roads and substructures be taken over by the town, in addition to come under all other services provided by the town. We have successfully collected 100% of the required signatures, and that's been an effort by everyone in our community to make that happen. We feel this annexation will not only benefit us, but will also benefit the town of Weaverville. We're a relatively new subdivision, started sometime in 2016 and completed around 2021. We have a healthy tax base. Unofficially speaking, homes are selling in the range of $400,000 to $550,000+. And so we feel like we have a good tax base to provide. We also recognize that the Rings Creek Valley is a growth corridor. And as that growth takes place, we do not wish to be an island outside of the town of Weaverville. So all of the planned growth will be part of Weaverville, as I understand. So while we are in new development and not in need of immediate upgrades and repairs, now we feel is a good time for a request for annexation. I would like to leave you with this message from our Maple Trace neighborhood. When the question was put to them, what would you prefer, the HOA or the town of Weaverville have control over the future of your roads and services and funding? The overwhelming response was the town of Weaverville And as a result, that's why we have 100% of our neighbors requesting annexation. And underlying that decision is the security and management of tax dollars versus private investments that we would have. A governing body and professional staff to oversee and assess the services and needs that we would have. The desire to support and be part of the town we already feel that we belong to. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. And Councilman Rose will note, of course, that is part of our discussion and action items tonight. Next, we have Matt Allen.
Good evening. My name is Matt Allen. I am the Director of Professional Development and Government Affairs at the Land of the Sky Association of Realtors. We are a trade association. We represent over 2,100 realtor members across Madison, Buncombe, and Transylvania counties. Our organization, LOTSAR is the acronym, Land of the Sky Association of Realtors. We're also a founding member of a short-term rental coalition called STR Trust. The membership in that group is very diverse. It's not just people who own or manage short-term rentals. It's people, cleaning service companies, landscape artists, plumbers. That group meets 4 times a year, and for people who are hosts, we have a good neighbor guide that addresses trash, parking, and nuisance. And I just wanted to come today to introduce myself and offer our organizations up as a resource as the town of Weaverville starts to look at short-term rentals and possible regulations. I was at the planning board meeting, and my understanding is the next step will be either them or they will create a task force to get community input, some other things as next steps. Just would very much like to make sure that our group and our members are involved in those discussions. We have a lot of resources, a lot of people who know a lot about this issue. We actually commissioned a study a few years ago on the economic and housing impact of short-term rentals. So we are here, we're available, and depending on what next steps are, we would like to be involved in that discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilman Rose will note that that item too is on our discussion items this evening. Next speaker is Jackie Fox.
I'm Jackie Fox. I live down on Central Avenue here in Weaverville. I've lived here all my life. I'm here to talk about the 4th of July and the fireworks. I have heard through the grapevine that we've had some people complaining about fireworks and everything in our town. And I just want to let you know that we love it. We've lived here all of our life. We have always come to the fireworks. Our town is so special, and to be able to have something like that.
That wasn't for you.
That's okay. Our parents have brought us to the fireworks, to the displays. We're bringing our grandkids. Our friends come into town. We have people that are coming in, spending money, and they come specifically for the fireworks. So I just want to be in support of that. I want to thank y'all for all your hard work, because I know it's a lot of preparation. I know it's a lot of hard work, but we appreciate it. And we want to keep it in our town. We don't want to have to travel to Asheville. We don't want to have to travel anywhere. We love being right here in our own town, supporting our own businesses and our own people here. So I hope that you realize that there's a lot of people in the community that love this. And they also were talking about what a beautiful display it was this year, probably the best that Weaverville has done. And so I just want to tell you that we support that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the last speaker is Alan Shepard. That's not for you either.
Didn't get a word in.
Picked on her, but that really. Alan Shepard, live on Central in Alabama. First, I have to say everything that she said, so I'll just let her say what she said about the fireworks. Of course, everybody knows where I feel on that one. Secondly, we had a little small apartment fire at our guest apartment back in November. And I want to give kudos, which I promised the fire department, I've still not done it. I got kicked in the teeth tonight and said, you need to bring this back up and do it again, but they were over the top. Police department was also over the top. And I told them when they left that night that I owed them like a big supper, and we still owe them a big supper, because it was the most professional. And actually, they got into a range that nobody else knew how to get into a range, and also Jeff Justice with EMS. He showed up. Actually, he walked across the street from drinking beer. You know, and also I think what happened with that also is there was a lot of addresses got changed in downtown, because we'd always been known as 100 Central Avenue, but the fire department was setting up the street trying to figure out where the devil 100 Central Avenue is. So finally, when Jeff Justice got on his radio and said Shepherd House, so then they figured it out. But I understand we had multiple addresses changed because the EMS address and the old Public Works addresses were not the same. That's the good news. On the city offices being closed from 12:30 to 1:30 for lunch, I get it, I understand it. We have about 65 employees. We don't shut our business down from 12:30 to 1:30. And we've had multiple people contact us. We actually had a renter try to get into the town. Working people, they take their lunch 12, 1, and we're closing down our offices where people can't get in there to pay their water bill, whatever it may be. So maybe a consideration, we keep somebody on staff in there just to be able to take bills, et cetera. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
So moving on, agenda item 7, our discussion and action items. Item A is an annexation petition from the Maple Trace subdivision. And Attorney Jackson, can you bring us up to snuff on this request?
I can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. King addressed you during general public comment and gave you a bit of an overview of the annexation petition. The town is in receipt of a petition that again, we haven't checked it all, but it's purportedly 100% of the lots, which is 135-ish lots plus 8 common areas. And so we've got the file's pretty thick, and it does need to be thoroughly vetted, but we believe that there is an annexation petition that is complete enough to bring forward to you. It does cover an area of approximately 65 acres. The streets within that, they're all private subdivision streets, and there appear to be about 1.4 miles worth of streets in there, plus the stormwater drainage system associated with that. As Mr. King indicated, their primary purpose for the annexation petition is to receive municipal services and for the private roads to be taken into the town's public street system. We've got several things that you normally do if this is an annexation petition that you want to consider. And again, this is completely discretionary for town council. If you do wish to consider this annexation petition, there's a resolution in your packet that does 4 things. Number 1, it requests that the town clerk investigate the sufficiency of that petition, and that's twofold. Number 1, make sure that all of the property owners within that annexation area have signed the petition. And number 2, it makes sure that because it is not a contiguous property to the primary limits of the town, it makes sure that it qualifies as a satellite annexation. We have preliminarily looked at that and believe that it is valid consideration for you. So that's number 1. Number 2 is requesting the planning board consider and recommend the most appropriate zoning district for these properties. They are claiming vested rights. This is a subdivision that was approved through the county. It is virtually built out. There may be a lot or two in there that have not yet been built upon, and they have requested vested rights so that those future lots will be developed with the same regulations that the rest of the subdivision is. It's probably most closely aligned to an R2 zoning. But again, what the resolution would do is it would allow, it would direct the planning board to take a look at that and send a recommendation for that initial zoning for these properties. Number three, you typically get a staff report on these annexations anyway, but it requests that your staff provide that analysis for you so that you can consider which each of your departments, each departmental comments and how it might affect their ability to preserve or to provide those services. And lastly, and really the most complicated part of this has to do with their request to have their streets taken over. And what the fourth request does is that it asks your public works developer public works director to develop a testing and inspection program to take a look at those roads and see whether they comply with town street standards, what the condition of those streets are, any improvements that that need to be made in order to bring them up to a good working level, to inspect the stormwater drainage system, the inlets in the drainage system, just so you know what the condition of that is as well, because you want to know what you're getting if you do accept these streets into the town system. And Mr. King and others have indicated that they look forward to working with Mr. Pennell on that. And what the resolution does is it puts the responsibility on the homeowners association to carry out that testing and perhaps some repair work, and then allows Mr. Pennell to report back to you at some point in the future on where that lands. As you might, and this is the same or very similar process that you might remember that we used or that we offered to use for Creekside when they asked their streets be taken over. So again, very similar process there. They chose not to proceed with that testing, but that's what was offered to them. Last thing that the resolution does is it does acknowledge that this is a large annexation. Normally, we turn this around and have reports back to you within a month or two. That's just not possible due to the comprehensive nature of this petition. And we do have in there that we're directed to report back at your November meeting, if not before. We will, I would imagine that we're going to keep you updated, even if it's through the manager's report on where things stand. But certainly setting a deadline for us to formally report back to you no later than November. Any questions of me? And I'm sure Mr. King is here and with various other folks. And I'm sure if you have questions, they're happy to answer.
Does anyone have any questions for either the attorney or Mr. King?
I have a question regarding, let's say the results come back and remedial work is needed. Would there be a chance to negotiate who's going to pay for that work before we accept?
Yes. What I would anticipate is that if the testing does come back that there is some level of repair work that needs to be done either in one section or throughout, that then becomes it's going to be up to the HOA to decide what they want to undertake and what they don't. Mm-hmm. And then it's up to you as town council to decide whether you want to annex, understanding what they're willing to do and what they're not willing to do.
Sure. Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'd rather go last instead of second, but yeah, I have questions.
I think second and last are the same at this point.
So some of these may be to Dale too, and trying to remember if this was a new project. How many entrances on a project like this? Are we still, does our ordinances say one entrance in, or did we ever change that to two? Because there was discussion about two.
So when I began, it was 2 and then went to 1. And one of the reasons, I should mention, historically, I understand the reason that this project was not, taken in originally at the beginning was because the entrance into the subdivision was over essentially a 1-lane bridge over Reems Creek. And I think that was your then Public Works Director, Mr. Lauder, was concerned about that and owning a bridge, a 1-lane bridge, and the adequacy of that to get folks in and out. Since that time, actually, I think it finished very, very recently. DOT has actually put in a 2-lane brand-new bridge over Reems Creek, and so that is now, that original consideration has been sort of taken off the table because of that upgraded DOT maintained bridge.
So yeah, obviously same thing, in typical fashion, the department heads, the fire chief would at some point chime in and go, I'm not comfortable with trying to get fire trucks in there, or I am. Second thing I don't see, and again, I know they're asking for vested rights, so I'm looking at it real time or not real time, I'm just looking at the satellite view. So I don't think there's sidewalks. I can't tell if those are sidewalks. There may be sidewalks in there.
Mr. King, can you address that? Where are you?
No, there are no sidewalks in the development, but every lot has a deeded right-of-way, about a 10 or 12-foot deeded right-of-way across every piece of property in there.
Thank you. And then same thing as, as we look at it, it's a nice looking development. There's a lot of green space, but then as we're trying to figure out where it's, and I'm sure James will chime in, they're pretty close together. So they're gonna come in as they are. There's nothing we can do, but it would be interesting to know setback and lot size, how it compares to everything else, and it may be perfectly fine.
As Mr. Eller's coming up, that is something that I'm sure that
Is it my time
no.
limit?
That is something that the planning board would be taking a look at, but it's got some.
As I understand it, one of the reasons why we're exploring the possibility of declaring vested rights is the county development standards has smaller setbacks. The setbacks within this development are 15 in the front and 7 on the sides, if I understand correctly. That's a little bit tighter than anything that our traditional zoning districts would allow. The setbacks within the R2 zoning district that Ms. Jackson referenced earlier is 30 in the front and 10 on the sides. So one of the biggest discrepancies are those setbacks that are already in place for the development.
Yeah, and I'm like I said, I'm not saying that's good or bad. I think as we go to vote on this, as we compare, just so we know, what are our normal things? If we're requiring sidewalks now on new developments, they're not, that's fine. So just trying to get, and then probably the only other thing that I wouldn't mind knowing is how are we doing on islands? I think something touched recently, and then we lost an island, and there's a state law with percent of, is it percent of population or percent of acreage for islands?
Acreage.
Percent of acreage, we're at 1.8%, if I remember correctly, in this. If we were to annex all the property within the subdivision, we would not get anywhere close to our 10%.
It's 10.
threshold.
Yeah, and something came off an island because something got
Connected.
annexed to connect it. We were there.
And I believe, and Ms. Key, you should address this, that they're very close to town limits. There's a road that connects them. And so what is this, is there some status update on the road that connects you to Pleasant Grove? Is that correct? Mr. Key? Okay. Is there any change in status, any status update with regard to the road that connects Maple Trace to Pleasant Grove or Parker? I'm not sure what the name of the road is, I'm sorry.
There is not a connecting road. Originally, I believe there was a discussion about a connecting road from Maple Trace to Pleasant Grove, but that never transpired.
No, I mean, but the road that goes into your subdivision.
The gap.
Yeah.
The gap between you and the town limits.
Okay.
We're trying to make it contiguous here.
From Parker Cove.
Harperco, I'm sorry. I
Okay,
couldn't
that's
remember
what was
I couldn't remember which
confusing
the
Okay,
connecting
yes.
road was.
Originally, with the old one-lane bridge, there was about a 300-foot gap between Maple Trace subdivision and where the state road came in. When they built the new bridge, the new two-lane bridge, they purchased from the homeowner that owned that property all but about 70 feet of that road. I have been in discussions with the homeowner. He is agreeable to doing a transfer to Maple Trace of that strip of road. I spoke with him yesterday. I have a letter of intent from his real estate agent. And so if council sees fit to ask, this to be investigated, then I'm going back to them tomorrow and tell them we need to move forward on that. Essentially, we have a right of way, but the problem is the town needs us to actually own the property. And what reason he is willing to do that, he owns about 8 acres there that he would like to have potential town water access if they wanted to annex it. So that's why one of the reasons he's willing to do that swap for us. Also, for him, if they wanted sewer access, they would have to come across Maple Trace. So we're willing to give those right-of-ways in exchange for the property.
Perfect. Thank you.
Can I ask while you're up
Yes,
there?
sir.
Are you, your homeowners and yourself, are you familiar with the whole, or close enough familiar with what was requested from Creekside? And they were just like, no way, it's gonna bankrupt us if we do this, the core samples and how, so I just didn't know if you guys at all had any knowledge of what was requested of Creekside Village.
I'm a little bit familiar with Creekside, but I have had some discussions with Dale Pennell, and we were aware we would have to do some core drilling and have some testing, and we're willing to undertake that and bear the cost of that, obviously. But one thing we would ask that whoever is that we get direction from Dale as to what types of drilling and testing need to be done, because if we don't want to have something done that doesn't fulfill his needs.
No, right, agreed. It'd be in concert with Dale and his team, but just, and I don't remember what the sticker shock was, but it wasn't their appetite, right? Too expensive. So I didn't know if you had any clue what that, from the Creek side, and I'm not saying they're similar, but it wasn't necessarily cheap. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have one more question. I'm assuming that the little cul-de-sacs and one of the kind of dead ends, does that provide enough maneuverability for emergency services?
Well, that's what they'll have to tell us.
I think that's what that would be part of their sufficiency testing.
Okay.
Any others? Is there a motion for action on this item, on this resolution?
Yeah, I'd make a motion that we move it to that next step as laid out by, Jennifer, and if it's at the resolution, adopting it that way.
That's it. Yep.
Yep.
So the motion is to adopt the resolution as worded. Okay, everyone in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Next item is item B, is the code amendments on road and park closure compliance, and Attorney Jackson, you're up again.
Thank you. So the town manager and police chief have been talking about a concern that they have, a safety concern related to individuals that choose to remove or move road closure signs and sort of violate those closed roads and closed areas, driving through roads that are closed, and theoretically really jeopardizing some safety, public safety. And interestingly, the police chief tells me, and I don't have any reason to not believe him, that state law actually does a pretty poor job of outlawing folks to essentially drive through closed streets. And so we felt like the best way to address this is to do that by ordinance. You have general ordinance authority, including specifically public safety issues. And so we have proposed a code amendment that does a couple of things in Chapter 28. Chapter 28 is traffic and parking. So it defines a barrier and then makes it unlawful to remove any traffic control device, marking, sign, or barrier, including but not limited to those that would indicate that a public street and or sidewalk is closed. And then it goes one step further to say that the use of any street or sidewalk that's been marked as closed is also illegal. And that applies to vehicular and pedestrian traffic unless the purpose of the closure is to allow the free movement of pedestrians. Art and autumn, your 4th of July, all of those, the closure of the ordinance is, or the closure of the road is to allow folks to walk in the road. And so we obviously want to accept that. And then the same type of thing in the closed parks. When Dale has a need to close a section of the park, I'll use an example that I think is you're going to see within the next couple of months as we begin to disassemble the playground equipment to make room for the new playground equipment. That area is going to be unsafe, and so he's going to have a need to close that playground, and it is. We just want there to be a penalty for using that, because this is a safety issue.
So just make sure I said, there is currently no penalty, is that correct?
Theoretically, that's true. This would put into place it would make it unlawful, and therefore, and then the next part of that is to talk to you about adding to your fee schedule a civil penalty for that, in addition to a criminal penalty, or in the alternative of a criminal penalty.
So there's no impact by somebody violating it today, so they get reported by somebody in the community, and then what happens today?
Today,
Nothing.
nothing.
Okay. Have we had any incidents where this has happened?
Yes, regularly. I can tell you from just my experience, and the police department can obviously report on their own, as well as Public Works. Just for the July 4th event alone, we had a band member. Fireworks had just completed, and everybody was headed home. The street was packed full of people. A band member removed cones at the back, at this entrance back here, and started barreling through tons of people. Another incident, someone came out of another intersection up the street as Public Works was trying to clean and do the last minute, or at the end of the show, start preparation for opening the roads. And a young lady came through another closure and came through again another group of people. And those are just two instances. We had instances before the event as well, where people were moving barricades and driving down Main Street when the road clearly says closed. And so this happens regularly. And again, these folks can share more of those events, but I think we owe it to our employees and to the residents to make certain that people aren't driving on closed roads.
They've also had the same problem during parades, and people
Absolutely.
take down
Absolutely.
the barricades and drive into the parade.
Right.
Well, yeah, see, when you bring up parades, we put these other measures in, and we had a lot of discussion around parades. But I guess the question to me is, why is state law goes such a big obvious gap then? I mean, it seems like somebody would have gotten sued by now or some
Yeah, I'm-
hellacious incident.
I'll let Chief Davis come to the podium to answer that, but let me speak on the issue of the fee, and we're not looking at the fee tonight, correct?
Yeah,
It's in
we
there.
are.
It isn't, okay. So, okay, so the fee, just in the fee alone, just give me a moment, Chief Davis. There's been some question about why, we're proposing $300 for this fee. And let me give you a real simplistic way of looking at this. We charge people $250 for allowing their dog to run at large. $250. To me, charging $300 for a clear life safety issue is the least we need to charge in this kind of situation. I mean, these are serious events. So this young man that I confronted as he's traveling south was, I mean, literally barreling into tons of people walking back down the street to go to their vehicle.
So what I'm confused about, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, so he doesn't know there's gonna be a fee for moving his cone, right? He's not gonna know that. If I walk up, your cones are now gonna say, move me, and it's gonna cost you $300.
They
So I
can.
move- Huh?
They can. We post signage.
Sure, but he moves the cone, and then somebody, Public Works, a police officer, you go, it's a closed road, put the cone back. And he goes, oh, I'm sorry, he puts the cone back. Or he goes, who are you? I don't know you. And you go, I'm the town manager. He goes, you got ID? I mean, I'm trying to play, so I move a cone, and a Public Works guy's gonna hit me and we're gonna get a fight now? Or is it gonna be a policeman going, you're now under arrest because you moved the cone or because you drove into a closed street? So I don't have a problem writing law. I always worry how you're gonna enforce it. And then at the end, I got a very specific question about whose cones, but I didn't mean to interrupt you, Chief.
That's quite all right, thank you. I look at it, I think we might need to look at it this way. I don't know if anybody knew this, but if there was a road closed sign up and there was high water on the other side of that, there was no mechanism, or that was not against the law, to drive around that barricade to go into the water area where you had to be rescued prior to 2019. I think this is something similar to what we're looking at here in this case. While there's specific statute, let's say, for not stopping at a stop sign, there is no such verbiage for this, for state law about going around a barricade or something that's obviously closed.
How do you see it play out, the scenario I just gave you? So you're at town hall, the band member doesn't know. How do you see that even?
Well, one is the signage. I would like to increase our signage from very simple signage at obvious points, but of course we can't put that everywhere with all of our intersection road closures and whatnot. I really look for this to be much like what we're doing now. Those people who are not, who are obviously moving barricades to put a vehicle on a roadway, they need to have, I wouldn't even say some warning of this. We're not talking about somebody who just walk on the other side of a barricade or a tape or a cone for convenience. This is meant to address those that are some pretty flagrant violations just simply because they don't want to wait.
So if I, without this ordinance, so I move the cone and I start driving and forget Selena and forget Dale's people, and one of your officers says to me, stop. And I go, I'm gonna keep going, and they're gonna go stop, and I go, well, you don't have an ordinance, the state doesn't have an ordinance, I'm allowed to drive on this road. And you go, no, I'm an officer of the law, I'm giving you a directive to stop, and I keep saying no, can you not arrest me for that?
Yes, that's,
Okay.
there is a specific statute for that, but with this, I feel this is a good intermediate step to try to curtail that action before it has to go to something.
Yeah, I would just like to make sure that we don't, I think our town is not Woodfin, so we don't do what Woodfin does. Okay, so I think, that we handle it, we don't go targeting people, we don't target parking.
And we are able to correct these actions, with something, especially the way that the nature of everything is going now. I hate to not have this mechanism in place as a good intermediate step.
All right, so my last question is, so I'm trying to read it quick enough, and I read it the other night. Whose cones? Town cones, state cones,
Please.
all Splendid's cones, who's trimming the trees? Whose cones?
It's a combination of whatever that looks like it's an obvious barrier.
Right, so construction guys and tree guys and Duke Energy think they own the road. So in front of my house, I have traffic lights with a barrier. Is that illegal? So who gave him, maybe James or the town gave him, it's a state road, somebody gave him permission. So that goes down and I go around it because my driveway's right there. I asked him to put it further from my driveway. There's no trucks coming and I'm not an idiot. So there's a red light and there's a barrier, it says don't go. And I can see where the trucks come on Aiken Road. And I drive around it and turn up my driveway.
Well, I think that in your.
Would I get a ticket or a
In
citation?
your case on Aiken Road with the signage, that's a little bit different in that we're not talking about a road that's closed, that's obviously closed like Main Street.
Right,
There's other laws that apply, say movement violations, stop sign violations when the arms are down on that. There's a lot of stuff that applies in your case that would
Okay.
not apply.
and can anybody, and that's what I'm just trying to, I just want us to be clear, so you see that, so state law may supersede, and I don't know these things, they're working on all the power poles, and the girl's out there with her stop sign, that's a legal stop sign?
That's correct.
Okay, and that's covered by state law? Okay. I haven't run around them, I patiently wait for them. Not that
I get the rationale here and appreciate walking through that. And again, I'm still kind of surprised that this gap exists, so to speak. So it sounds like we would, if we do this, we would be kind of breaking new ground with law enforcement in a good way. But if you had any dialogue with other departments, like, do you recognize this and are you looking at it?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot of other towns that they just simply have not. My research has shown that there is very little in the way of traffic control whenever an officer is not present. There's
Okay.
ample law that would support that when there is a police officer there, but not at any of the points of ingress and egress that we have, which we just simply can't.
I mean, maybe it's overkill, but is it worth having any kind of dialogue with like Raleigh, like, hey, we're thinking of putting this in place? How does this look, or is there anything we're missing? Not throwing process at this, but.
Well, again, I think that I'm just with the state law, just simply not covering it. It just seems that you think that there would be some way to say, oh, look, that obvious barricade, you cannot move it. But there's just not.
And we could always amend it later anyway.
We can get it done a lot quicker than Raleigh's.
Yeah,
I guess,
I know, as soon as I said that, I'm going, what am I saying?
and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I guess maybe one of these things is we should alert the Department of Public Safety that this town is doing this, is that, which is?
Yeah, there's that too, sure.
I don't look for this to be used often, but I would like a tool in our toolbox to call this to somebody's attention for violence.
And just to be clear, when you said an intermediate step, violators in most instances would get a ticket, not be arrested.
It depends
Unless
on
they
what the
do-
officer, it depends on what the officer saw at the time and was able to do. If the action to correct it by using a simple warning, that's what they would do. If it took something like a citation or arrest, it'll progress.
Okay.
I have a question. I live on Brown Street adjacent to Park Street, and oftentimes the road closure, I would call it maybe a soft closure, because I think those people get a little locked in there and they might need to come or go. My understanding of that would be okay if I came home late from work and I needed to slip home. That's one thing. But I have witnessed people fly up Brown Street. Oh, I can't turn left on Merriman Main Street. Fly back down, slam on brakes, jump out of their car, move the cones on park and drive down park, not realizing there's another barrier at the bottom of the street. And so, yeah, frustrating.
Any other questions for the chief?
I think adding signage is important because if people assume it's okay what can you do to me? Then, you know, they're shocked when you finally say, you can't do that. Well, why can't I? You know, I've always done it. That's what you're gonna hear is, I've always done this. And so signage that makes it clear that you will be, and I think that when a car is going through traffic like on the 4th of July, it shouldn't be a warning. It should be a definite ticket.
Well, and there are a lot of these businesses, we just simply cannot put a sign up for every driveway,
Right.
every roadway. You just simply can't do it. If it looks obvious to you, though, that it's closed with cones, tape, and a series of barricades, I think that should suffice.
Well, and so when you asked 3 questions, did you see that? Yes. Did you understand it was closed? Yes. And you moved it anyway? Yes. Okay.
And the signage is read by people who are rural people.
Yes, I don't
Well,
think,
and that's
I
what
don't
they
think
say on
signs stop rule
locks
breakers.
Locks keep honesty, you know?
Also keep in mind that this is for this is really going to be used primarily for road closures.
Right.
So for instance, 4th of July, Music on Main, you're going to see those flashing electronic boards.
Hey, didn't we
A
buy a
week ahead of
fancy
time.
barrier?
Yes,
We did, but we've also got 61 intersections.
Let's buy
And
61
that
of them.
Very expensive.
Get a discount.
So
2 for 1 before midnight.
So, I mean, this is not just, there's one street closed. This is when we're having a major event. Like, for instance, tonight, you approved the Art and Autumn road closure.
Which is
This,
not 61, it's like 9 or 10, right? For our-
I think,
No.
I think the manager means possible points of ingress and egress for
Yes.
vehicles.
Right.
Yes.
That's driveways, that's
intersections,
not just
driveways,
intersections.
yeah,
Where a car can get through.
yeah. We absolutely do not have the staffing for those
Well, I mean, I think
types
it's a good idea, but I agree with
Yeah.
Andrew, if you can do something, if you can enforce it.
of signage and signage as well.
Any other questions for the chief? And so is there a motion to take action on this item?
I'd like to make that motion, and also I'd like to make a comment. I make the motion that we accept the code amendment, but I think it takes common sense. I remember a few years ago, I was coming back from Atlanta, Georgia, and the traffic was backed up on the highway, 4-lane. This hot shot and this pickup truck decided to get on the grass immediate and just barrel it all the way up there. There was no sign or anything, but that's just common sense. That's something you don't do. And you see a cone and everything. I think that's enough of a warning. You don't have to put signs up for everybody.
So there's a motion to adopt the code amendment. Is there any other questions or discussion?
Jeff, are you adding something?
So adopting the code amendment
Yeah.
is what I heard in the
Yeah,
motion.
that's right.
If you wanted to go ahead and set a penalty, you could amend your fee schedule to provide a $300 penalty for removal of traffic-related signs and for road or park closure violations. So that could be done as a separate motion or added to yours.
Want to add that to your motion?
Yep.
Okay, so be it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next item is item C, ADA transition plan update. Attorney Jackson, you're still up to bat.
Still up. We just finished our 3rd year of the ADA transition plan, which was a plan that seeks to improve town facilities and infrastructure to make them more ADA accessible. You 3 years ago appointed me as the ADA coordinator, and so I try to give you at least an update on an annual basis just to let you know the progress that's being made. Over this last year, we had 2 ADA accessibility complaints or comments. One had to do with the steepness of the side of the ramp at the Lake Louise Park. It's just a little, it was reported to be a little bit too steep, and so it was on it's that switchback ramp right by the fitness center.
Isn't there probably a mathematical calculation versus it's
There
a
is.
little too steep?
There is, I don't know what.
No, I'm not saying you
the
need
has
it,
to run.
but I go, it's a little too steep, and somebody goes, no, it's actually right to code.
Right.
There's a
And so
code, right?
There is a code.
Okay, and so we're probably
And the
in
ADA.
violation of the code.
Correct. That's
Okay.
what the ADA, that's what our engineers found, that,
Okay.
that our rise overrun was too, just a tad too much. This complaint came to me and it sort of put a real face to this, because I look at it and say, it's not that steep. But if you can imagine a petite elderly lady, and as lovely as Dottie Sherrill is, I'm going to use her as an example, and pushing somebody in a wheelchair up that ramp, or just as importantly, down that ramp, and maintaining control over that wheelchair. It sort of brought that to life for me. And so we do need to make sure that we're looking at that ramp. Although some of the work that the Public Works Department has done recently to pave the trail, I think now has a better access, a paved access down into that park through a handicap parking space. So now that even though the ramp might be not compliant with ADA, there may be a workaround for it that is helpful.
I just gotta say, Dottie Shell shouldn't be pushing anybody in a wheelchair.
Right.
She's just too little.
Right.
Andrew has already said he would push her garbage cans out.
Yeah.
So the other complaint or the other comment that we have had has to do with the tables and chairs that are on the sidewalks on Florida Avenue. And this really is a clear violation of the ADA accessibility rules, because you must have a minimum of 3 feet of sidewalk clearance. And if you have on a state maintained road like the Main Street, it should be a minimum of 5. And so staff did have some compliance letters that went out last week, and we will kind of reassess, but they're going to need to do something different on that, the south side of Florida Avenue, because it is completely impassable. And what you're having is people walking in the road there as opposed to on the sidewalk, or people trying to squeeze by and slipping off of the sidewalk. And I mean, there's no possibility of getting a wheelchair or a stroller through there. So that's something that we're working on. Highlights of this year, I won't necessarily go into looking, they're in your packet. Just sort of looking towards the future in this upcoming year, you are going to see some new playground equipment that does have some ADA accessible functions or features to it. There will be a reconfiguration of the town hall parking lot in the back to better accommodate handicap parking. What is not in this year's budget that is still pending, because we've got it's going to be a difficult project to figure out. The ADA, or the handicap parking space right outside of town hall, is not compliant because it exits directly onto a sidewalk, and that prevents the use of some handicap equipment, vehicle equipment. So we do have to look at a reconfiguration of that, and then also just sort of looking and seeing how many handicap spaces, and are they enough along the Main Street area. Any questions? Any questions of me?
How do we assess, not just ADA compliant equipment, but all the exercise equipment, playground equipment, everything installed down there? Do we have any kind of formal, informal way of figuring out, is it all being utilized? Is some not being utilized very much? Or we just look for a comment on it?
At this point in time, none of the equipment down there is ADA compliant, accessible. There's a difference in the wording there. None of it is made for disabled folks.
On the fitness
On the
equipment.
fitness equipment, right.
Okay.
There's a few pieces of the playground equipment, the current playground equipment, that are not compliant necessarily, but they are somewhat accessible.
The playground equipment was tagged as, the railings were not of a sufficient, at this point, I don't know whether they were too small or too large. I think they were too large. So the railings on the existing playground equipment were non-compliant. But Public Works did install an ADA accessible swing that I have seen used, and the new equipment will have several ADA accessible features.
Okay.
The whole thing does not have to be ADA accessible, but it sure is nice to have some parts of that are.
But even beyond ADA, I mean, just knowing if this piece of equipment never gets used versus this one's used like crazy, do we have any kind of way of staying on top of that? Like, oh, that was a bad decision, we didn't need that thing, but wish we had two of these, you know what I mean?
We can certainly, Mr. Pennell, if you want to come to the podium, we can, you can tell by drive-by counts.
Yeah, right,
nothing else.
anecdotally, you can say,
That's
oh,
right.
Well, I was gonna echo, Ms. Manager, what you just said. I drove by there Thursday afternoon, just after lunch. Best I could count, there were 54 people on the equipment. They didn't count parents as well, but just on the playground equipment. So it's well used, and there's some days the exercise equipment is equally well used, and people waiting for someone to get off the recumbent bike or the pull-up bars. So I think that we're providing more than adequate.
He's diving too deep. He wants to know if you need 6 recumbent bikes and 1 pull-up bar, or 6 pull-up bikes and 1 recumbent.
See, he's on that recreation committee.
He's a rower, okay? He's an athlete.
I'm not trying to boil the ocean here, I was just, curious. Right.
He wants webcams and analytic sensors put on it.
Yeah, there you go, AI, you need some AI in this.
Increase that budget.
That's good enough, the Dale drive-by count is good enough
I
for me.
think that was suffice, yes.
And it doesn't take any kind of professional to do that same drive-by.
You
It's,
could
uh,
do it too.
I can walk by it.
Just walk by.
Yeah, there you go.
As your exercise.
I knew I was gonna regret this as soon as I got out of it.
Can you come in with him about that?
We'll be expecting a report next
All
month.
right, can I
Thank you.
strike all of this?
The last thing I'll say is that Mr. Pennell's got his street paving program that is just, we're close on that. And as a part of that, you're gonna probably see 50 to 60 of the ramps on sort of the downtown area, town streets that will be upgraded or retrofitted in order to be ADA accessible or better ADA accessible. So that's the last thing that I wanted to mention.
Any more questions on this item? Thank you. Next item up is item D, the planning board update. And Planning Director Eller, will you let us know what the planning board has been up to?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Over the past few months, the planning board have dove pretty deeply into the issue of open space or conservation design and the issue of short-term rentals. And they are asking for some additional guidance from council tonight prior to diving into either of these two issues further. I'm going to begin with open space or conservation design. The current goals of the comprehensive land use plan call for the consideration of regulations that encourage open space or greenway dedication and conservation measures. We emphasize encourage here, as specifically is stated in the comprehensive land use plan. The planning board's conversations on this topic have shifted from encouragement to requirement, and we're going to circle back around to that in just a moment. So an example of conservation design could be an environmental inventory that identifies certain natural features on a property that could or should be protected during development. This shift away from encouraging that would provide reduced setbacks or lot areas or density increases is a significant enough of a departure from, again, encouragement. We want to give town council the opportunity to provide their opinion to the planning board before moving any further. in the requirement direction. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
So tell me what kind of so currently our land use plan says that we should consider regulations that encourage open space or greenway dedication and conservation measures. Give us some examples of what regulations to encourage open space might be.
The most common in North Carolina is a conservation subdivision design, but we've sort of broadened that to conservation design that wouldn't necessarily be only applicable to single-family homes. A vast majority of the ordinances that do have these conservation design elements are encouraging in nature, and for, I'm just gonna make up a number, 20% of the total property being placed in a conservation easement or something of that nature. The ordinances of a particular jurisdiction could provide reduced lot areas, setbacks, or even density bonus. So that's the carrot, if you will. You're allowed to build on smaller lots or provide more density if you also agree to provide a certain amount of conservation area or open space.
And do we have any current type of regulations like that in town?
We do not.
Right.
So this is a little bit of a dangerous path. So you're going to tax my land, and now you're going to tell me I can't develop it all. So I'm looking at Maple Trace, and I'm like, no wonder the houses are so close. They got 8 acres right in the middle of that circle. So they've done something where they've made that decision, and we've had this conversation numerous times about density on usable land. Okay, so the Tajma apartments being built across from Lake Louise, and the sample group had 2.5 acres of unusable land. Okay, so then it's denser than normal, and I agree with you. You know, the way to do that is setbacks. The developers all want it. We know this. We've all been on council long enough. They want it as dense as possible. You know, and then we're going in, and I think that's where you know, it ends up being a conditional zoning, and then you're having this negotiation. So right now, and I brought this up probably 6 years ago, and then we didn't even try. If we really want landowners and to not develop their land, then why do we tax them on their undeveloped land? So if you have an acre and you have one house and you're an R1, you could put 3 more houses on there. That would increase the tax base. And obviously, if you're putting houses on it, you're getting taxed on that. But if I don't develop my property to the current zoning, maybe, and we don't have any control over this, I think somebody would correct me really quickly, it's probably the state or Buncombe County. Why am I paying tax if you don't want me to develop it? You as a town are saying, don't develop all your land. Well, then don't tax my land. Are you kidding me? So I think this is probably above all of our pay grades to start to go. We're gonna start to even further tell people what to do with their land, and yeah, I can't use it. Yeah, go look at what we approved for Duke. If you haven't driven past Duke, go by Duke and go, wow, we didn't know what we were doing. We're gonna only cut down the trees we need to. Well, that really was all of them. They lied, like it's all the trees. Go look.
So that's a good point, Andrew.
Yeah.
So what if instead of improving that even on the promise or the
Right.
of their developer, that what if there were limits on certain old growth trees of certain size?
I think
or
that's
age
great.
that-
Yeah.
So that would be a conservation regulation.
Sure, you sit there and go, sure. You go, are you gonna, and people have done that typically with places like Lowe's. So Lowe's down past the mall, when they were building, because you could do it. It had zero impact. It was a parking space, right? So I agree with you. You got this, and some expert now, somebody's gonna pay an expert to go, that tree,
It's X old.
right, and we got tons of oaks and they die, but that tree, and so in a parking lot, that's great. You know, Lowe's lost 3 parking spots. So, and that's common. That is a common thing when they're laying it out to look at trees, for sure. And I think trees are great. That's why we live in the woods.
We all have trees.
So,
But you just said that would be a rationale for regulation.
Well, I understand
In
that,
case.
that is a conservation regulation that I suspect many people would probably approve of.
Right.
So,
I mean,
right
until now-
now, we have nothing to prevent that.
Well,
Is
up
that
till
correct?
now, we've had an approach, like if it's a subdivision, and as you said, it's conditional zoning, we have a conversation, and I think as a
much green space.
council, we've done a pretty good job of saying, hey, what about this over here? Can you create this, and it's been a back and forth, and I think in general, that's worked fairly well versus the alternative is saying, we've got regulation everywhere and don't even need that discussion.
Well, I would agree, but using Andrew's example, what if we had said to Duke, you can cut these trees, but you can't cut certain trees of a certain size or a certain age? Would that land, which is now pretty much clear cut, look differently?
There was some discussion about that at that planning board, about saving the trees when they're clearing land.
And they said they would save as many as possible, which is what most people say.
Right.
But
Right.
we've had good luck with encouraging. I still think encouraging is the right thing to do. When I read the 32 pages of the North Carolina conservation subdivision, and out of 100 counties in North Carolina, there are 26 counties, including Buncombe County and Henderson County, who have already adopted some kind of encouragement. Of those 26 counties, only a few have actually successfully done something like this. The encouraging, though, that I think that we did on the planning is when you encourage people to provide dog parks or walk around the paths like we did behind the Walmart. I think encouraging people, we have encouraged for years, and I think that's still a good plan. If you start regulating, let's say you've got an old tree and we don't want you to cut it down, we're not going to let you cut it down. Who's going to become liable when it's like the Biltmore house and it falls on somebody and kills them? Is it going to be Weaverville that's liable because we didn't want you to cut down your old tree?
I can tend to agree, but what I also say is that even though we say we let you consider regulations that encourage, currently, we're not doing that. We say we're going to do that, but we're not. So I don't disagree that we should prefer encouragement as the,
Right.
use a carrot instead of stick. What I'm saying is, we're not using the carrot
Well,
either.
so that's
Well,
a
I
different
think,
strategy then.
Right.
To take what Catherine said and what you just said, are we doing a good enough job of following up, having the encouragement discussion and going back and forth? I mean, once you cross over to the regulation thing, you're throwing a whole lot of other responsibility at you and creating standards that none of us are, it's, as you said, way above our pay
For
grade.
the future Ollie Weaver, we encouraged that to be R8 instead of R12.
This is true.
And a big portion of that land that's right next to the 2570 or goes down, that will be like a nature trail, is what they say. Now, granted, it's like we've said before, sometimes people promise us things that don't come through.
I think that's, then to interrupt you, that's the nail on the head. And we have done a good job. We actually could have done a much better job. We sat here, and I don't think you guys were on council, we voted. We should have voted no on that apartments and went right to conditional zoning. So we voted yes to go from industrial to R12.
You're talking about the
The apartments across from Lake Louise.
Palisades,
The what?
Palisade.
Yeah, and that, I think, and that's the problem, council changes, right? So we're leaving and there'll be new people and it takes so many years to figure it out and learn to go, wow, that was a good one. Because Jennifer was sitting there telling us, you can't negotiate when you're going industrial to R12. The vote should have been no. And then encourage and negotiate.
But if we would have had what we're talking about right here, okay? Because that's in a floodplain, and because we encourage, they know they can't build in a floodplain, okay? So there's like an acre and a half or 2 acres there, they're not building in, people can walk and they can play and they can do whatever, and they put the sidewalk in that we asked for. And yes, what you would do under this 32 pages that North Carolina has said is if we encourage you to have a conservation thing, we'll let you build the same number of things in a smaller space.
Right, and
So that's a perfect example of it.
and I agree, and it gets back to a little bit why we voted against Barclay Terrace. We didn't like the setbacks. So yes, you could, and I agree with you, and I'm staring at Maple Trace again going, I think they did a pretty reasonable thing, right? They went denser with smaller lots, and they left, I think, what did it say, 8 acres or something like that, or something. They left a bunch of trees, and I'm looking at it going, that's pretty cool. They didn't pave it all over, right? And they could have. So I think, like I said earlier, I think we just need to be careful, and I think council should use conditional zoning James would kill us, but you go, we don't want anything over X, make it conditional zoning, right?
Yeah. Well, I think you're suggesting kind of more aggressive, if that's the term, encouragement, more informed encouragement
great with
versus
encouragement.
crossing over to regulation.
Yeah, how can we work together to make this happen?
Yes,
You know,
I agree with you.
by encouraging.
Yes.
So I do think town council has done a really good job of encouraging this in the development that comes to you for approval. Your conditional districts, I don't think I have heard a single town council conversation about any conditional district
Right.
that hasn't had some bit of your focus be this type of thing. Where we are now, and that will always be a negotiation between town council and the developer. You don't need necessarily guidelines for that. Where you do need some regulation, and when I say regulation, I mean something in the code that either encourages or requires. That's the focus of I think what the planning board is right now looking at. Your normal subdivision that you don't necessarily see. Your normal development, your multifamily development that occurred in R12 that you don't see. And so that's where we're looking for kind of a nod from you on stick with encouragement or whether you're okay in those situations, doing something more aggressive and requiring some things in those types of developments. That's what we're looking for.
Sure, and we just got to be very careful. So somebody has, like I said, so we'll even get down to, somebody has a half acre lot with the world's most famous oak tree that's eventually going to die because they all die, and it's right in the middle of the other quarter acre. So they're allowed to build another, and pretend it's the right width, it's 100 feet, it fits all the other things, and they're allowed to build another house there. And we go, no, you can't, because you have an old oak tree in that lot.
Does planning want to bring us 4 or 5 recommendations for what they would like to see? Is that what you're asking?
That's why we're here, I think. And again, I'm going to let Mr. Eller correct me if I'm wrong. They have trended more towards requirement, and that's where we said, in their recommendations, and that's where we kind of said, that doesn't look like it's really matching the comprehensive land use plan goal.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to get your feedback and see, and let you either correct the direction on the planning board back towards encouragement, or give some indication that yes, you're willing to consider regulation that sets some requirements for development. For
So you're
residential
looking for
development.
they're wondering if course correction is needed.
Yeah.
So what I'm kind of hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that council seems to be saying regulation is not so popular, but more aggressive encouragement is encouraged. Does that sound correct?
Well, encourage them financially. That's, can we do that? Can we say you don't tax the land then?
No.
Right. So that's
But we can do incentive-based regulations. We can say, we're going to give you X if you do Y. So maybe we'd be telling the planning board to come up with those types of suggestions.
So maybe that's the consensus that we're looking for. Are you most interested in seeing incentive-based regulations to encourage open space conservation design? What are the nods?
I'm not in favor of any of this, just so you don't think there's a consensus. I
Okay.
don't want to do this
You don't
at
want to
all.
do it at all.
And I want advance notice when we do this, so I could sell my 60 acres to a developer and get grandfathered.
Even
before you do
incentives,
this.
even putting in
There's
incentives.
what incentive? I'm one of the my family is one of the largest open landowners, and we don't need incentive. We want the turkeys and the bears. I don't need you to help me. But I sure as heck, when we bought the land, you go, this was the problem with this pyramid, and we changed it. You go, there's maybe one other person that owns more open land than us. So who are we talking about here? We've done it. Go look at the infill. Up behind Lake Louise, you got the pasture. There ain't many people that own a lot of land in this town.
Well, that was
I would also ask that we keep in mind both the Reams Creek Valley and the Monticello Road corridor. That's where all of our voluntary annexations are coming.
Absolutely.
And the planning board also had a conversation about exactly that. Who are you trying to?
targeting?
And they did want even minor subdivisions, so you could have a 2-acre lot in the middle of town that could, that could be subject to this.
Yeah,
I don't think that's a good idea, personally.
So let me try again. So it sounds like we're saying incentive-based encouragement, no. Regulation, no, but more aggressive encouragement measures. Does that seem correct?
So when you say encouragement, are you talking about incentives?
Well, I'm hearing some
I don't know what-
anti-incentive.
Yeah, I don't know how you aggressively encourage in your regulations without some incentives. How are you encouraging?
when they
Well,
need
for
something.
example, with the property we did over here behind CVS.
When they want something.
You know, when they want something.
That's
So
when
it's all
good.
going to be done at the conditional district level.
Right.
It's when they want, so we have existing zoning, so we can change that to within the laws, but that's what developers and property owners want to know. When I bought the land 25 years ago, you're now changing the game on me, and maybe you owe me some serious money, but maybe I don't want to move. Maybe I do want to move. Doug Dirth told me one time to move if I didn't like it, but I bought the land 25 years ago. It was zoned X, you had these rules, and I get life changes. But I did the right thing. I didn't develop it. And you guys are all going, don't develop your land. I go, I'm not. Now smash. I'm just frustrated.
Well, that's true. I hear what you're saying, but it's also true that the town changed over 25.
I know that,
The
absolutely.
population moved in, and we have to make arrangements for that.
Right, so we want more full borough housing. Go find a developer, and we need a developer on the planning and zoning board. More affordable housing, but you can build on less of your property. What did he tell us? He was like, I need every square inch, or I can't afford to do this, so affordable housing for the poor people.
That's true.
Right, and then we're gonna go back and tell, well, you need to leave 30% of that open. I mean, again, I love what Maple Trace did. Good for them.
I think
it might be helpful if we actually had a few examples from the planning board in terms of what they might
I
consider
think that would be
as.
helpful too. I'm not, because this is a little vague here.
Yeah,
We may be going to an extreme that they're not even thinking of.
Right.
and also knowing what the target is. I mean, we brought up a number of examples here ranging from a single-family lot to a development. That's a lot of green between those two examples. If the low-hanging fruit is, so to speak, in their mind, like out Reeves Creek and new developments to come, then we might, that's one thing. But if it's addressing every single piece of land that people own,
I mean, maybe one of the examples is instead of clear cutting to every single square inch of your property, your setbacks, you have a just area of disturbance that is much smaller than make it property, just so you can get your driveway and your house in. I mean, there may be some ways like that.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds to
James
me,
wants to say something. He's been
Oh, I'm
trying to
sorry.
say something. He's just polite, unlike me.
we have the philosophical question of encouragement or requirement. And we, I think, speaking on behalf of both staff and the planning board, would really like some direction on that moving forward. This is coming more from staff and certainly not from the planning board. There's also a question of scale. There was a lot of conversation at the previous planning board meeting where they would take it down to the one home on one lot level. And staff has a lot of concerns about that level of regulation and whether or not that would require us to take on grading that is currently done through Buncombe County Erosion Control. Because they will not enforce ordinances that are not in the Sedimentation and Erosion Control Act of 1978. So around and around we go. scary, you can cite that.
Yes,
It's really scary.
I'm wondering if this would be a really good topic for a joint meeting with the planning board. And you normally have a joint meeting around the August timeframe. And so this where you're also looking at your comprehensive land use plan
Can
priorities.
you move it to November, please?
If that's something,
I think that's a good idea, and maybe what we're doing is we need some examples of what they're what is it they're thinking, because right now we're it's just a philosophical type of conversation for us.
We've got an update of the comprehensive land use plan coming in the next few months. It may be a good idea to re-examine the issue at that time as well. Certainly not my position to dictate that, but
I think both of those opportunities will give us a chance to communicate with the planning board and find out what their thinking is, and that will give us an opportunity to address them in a more specific way than this kind of.
Yeah, and I guess just reaction wise, for what it's worth, I mean, when I hear we need direction or we're considering going from encouragement to regulation, in my brain that goes, okay, what you're really saying is what we've been doing doesn't work and you failed. And I don't really think that's the case. So part of it is, why do we need a different direction for something that seems to be working to date? But that's just me.
And in my thinking, you're going from nothing, because right now, again, setting your work on conditional districts aside,
Right.
we're going from no regulation at all to possible encouragement, which is typically incentives, to requirement. And so I think we're trying to figure out where on that spectrum.
But we have some regulation. We have zoning. I mean, go back.
Zoning, but not-
Patrick will straighten me out about 25 years ago. You know, counties had very little zoning, and then you get a mulch plant across from Stony Knob Restaurant when they had outdoor seating, which was absurd. It took a common sense person to go, I don't eat lunch smelling mulch, to being careful we don't, we have to do a better job, and whether the potential danger is, then I think that's asking Reeves Creek Valley, go, okay, what are they gonna be building there, and what regulations can we help for new people? They haven't bought into, they don't have to join the town, they're asking to join the town. Can you have those type of things to go, they know well in advance, before they buy the property from the old farm lady, and before they develop it, they know, and that's why we don't like vested rights, because ours are 40 height, and they're, instead of 45, and blah, blah, blah. So I think I would look at it that way for sure as well.
So let's try again. We normally have 2 meetings per year, a joint meeting with the planning board. I think the last one was in the springtime. Why don't we make this a discussion with the planning board, the next joint planning board, which will be probably in the next couple of months. Does that seem like a reasonable?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Everybody okay?
Sounds reasonable.
James, you asked a question, which we've danced all around, but you said one direction, whether it was requirement or encouragement. And we haven't answered that, but from what I've heard from the conversations, I think most of the people would prefer to not have it required and encouragement. And we've spent half an hour trying to see how we could encourage people. We'll let the planning board handle that, rather than us sitting here having to hash it out. But I think the bottom line is encouragement rather than requirements.
Okay, everybody good? And we'll talk about this more with the planning board. Does that help?
And please don't do the joint meeting in August, because I'm gone for the week.
And I think there's actually a couple who might be gone in August, so we won't do it in August. We'll shoot for September. Okay, Nick Simon. This was gonna be easy, right?
Different topic. On to short-term rentals. Just an update on the board's progress, what they've done so far related to the topic. They received a presentation from Landis-Tower Regional Council on potential regulations and strategies for short-term rentals. They've identified stakeholders. I hope my memory is appropriate here, but that was the WVA, planning staff, public works staff, police staff, also the Buncombe County TDA, and then lastly, if I remember correctly, hopefully this is it, short-term rental property owners. So those are the parties that they have identified that they would like to achieve some information from. And lastly, a combination of Manager Coffey and I distributed a questionnaire to our colleagues on some questions that the planning board had related to certain towns or certain jurisdictions, short-term rental regulations. We've gotten some of those back, and we'll be presenting that information to the planning board at their next meeting. The reason why the board is asking that we appear before council tonight is council basically blessed them as the working group for the short-term rental study, and they're sharing the concern that they don't offer a broad enough perspective on the issue, and thought that perhaps some of these stakeholder groups would have members that would be willing to help out the process as well. And of course, we heard from the gentleman earlier this evening that seems to be interested in that. So any direction that council may have related to the working group on short-term rentals would be appreciated at this time.
What do y'all think? Is it a good idea?
What would happen if you do create a stakeholders group? In other words, are they gonna make decisions, or are they gonna present to planning and zoning? And then planning and zoning is still gonna make some kind of a recommendation to us?
Recommendation would come to the governing board and ultimately voted by this.
Yes, I would think this is just an opportunity to get input from the different stakeholders. Planning board will still have to make recommendations to us, but it's just an opportunity to broaden the discussion, make sure everybody gets heard.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at every type of stakeholder on all sides of this, you know, residents, council people, planning board, realtors, developers, you know, everybody. Because given, we did say, go study this. It wasn't take action within 2 months. It was, this is complicated. It's way above our pay grade. It's out there in the community. So we need a broader group talking. I think that can only be positive. I'm glad they said, look, we're kind of out of bullets here for ourselves. We need more people involved. I commend them for doing that.
There was also some conversation about inviting maybe some folks from the other towns who are farther along in this than we are, who either have draft resolutions or have ordinances already in place, and find out what their process was, what worked, what didn't, what they did, what they wish they'd done, what they wish they hadn't done, just to make this a shorter process.
That was part of the questionnaire that the manager called me and I sent out to our colleagues, and so we do have some of that information.
So do
what
it-
the state is on some of their legislation that they have?
Didn't pass, right?
There was a bill that
Did not pass.
failed.
It didn't.
So there's no.
Yeah, I think
Still instead for now.
council can do whatever, you know, as long as 4 people agree, we can do things in a day and we can do things in 3 years. You know, I think we knee-jerk react too often. Somebody complains about a rooster, in the next meeting, we ban roosters in the town, regardless of the acreage. That doesn't make any sense. You go buy chickens at Tractor Supply, which is in town, you don't know if you're getting hens or roosters. So I had a rooster, so I was in violation of having a rooster. I live on enough property, my neighbors can't hear the rooster. Why can I not have a rooster? Don't correct me if I'm wrong, I'm close enough. So I think we've got to take our time sometimes, and because 3 people or 5 people or 20 people, there's 4,000 people in this town. How many people are yelling that we have problems? The loud people, okay, like me. So I think we need to sometimes breathe and step back and not always react when somebody's complaining. On a side note, because I'm a comedian and I like to make myself laugh, for everybody who watches Yellowstone, y'all are making me feel like John Dutton.
Well, I mean, it's a valid point about timeframe. On things like this, sometimes if you assume that something's going to take 3 months to study and come to conclusion, maybe we should just assume double it, because as you dig into it, you're going to find out you need more input. And what's the big deal of slowing it down and doing it right versus accelerating and accommodating people who are yelling the loudest? So
Okay, so
that's a balancing act, you know?
It sounds like I'm hearing we're saying to the planning board, yes, get the input from the other stakeholders. Is that correct, everybody?
Yep.
All right, good deal.
Does this town council want to participate in the appointment of that, or just let them come up with their own membership?
I say let them do it, everybody agree. It's their gig. Good luck, guys. Anything else, Ames?
I'm up next. I'll wait for the rotation of agenda items.
Okay, if there's no further discussion on the item,
He's
we're
up
gonna
next anyway. As far as
just stay up there, buddy.
report.
Quarterly report from planning, Mr. Eller.
I'll be as brief as possible. I feel like I've been standing here for pretty long enough, but the one number I'll call our attention to is at the very top of the page, is 42 zoning permits were issued this last quarter, 23 in June 1. It's busy. That being said, here I am. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Eller? Thank you, sir. Next report is a quarterly report from Finance and Finance Director Dozier.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So fiscal year 2023 is closed out with no real surprises. Our financials are currently under audit, so I don't have them for review tonight. The auditors will be on site the week of August 7th through 11th, and they'll present their findings to you probably at your November meeting. What I do have for you tonight is kind of a one-page summary of how we ended the year, some of our biggest revenues on page 32. I'll call your attention to the variance column that shows where we budgeted, what we're predicting will come in. These are unaudited numbers in the actual column, so that those numbers will change. But you'll see as you go down the variance column that everything, most everything has come in positive. ABC store, we actually got their fourth quarter distribution today. It was $150,000. So where you see a negative 2,244 is actually a positive $59,000. The bottom of that column where you see 744,419 in positive variance is actually $806,000.
Even better.
Wow.
Sorry?
Even better.
So about $500,000 of that will be general fund, and 272,000 of that will be in the water fund, because that is both funds together. Further down that page, these are just some highlights I thought you might find interesting. Paving program has rolled forward for the past 2 years. We're about to start a very big paving project. So the last 2 years will be rolling over. You'll see that at your next meeting. We'll be asking you to reappropriate those funds, because unspent funds go into fund balance. If it's a project that's not completed or something we haven't received yet, we ask you to reappropriate those into the current year, so we can still use those funds. You'll see cell tower revenue is $22,000. Community center rental fees, we all know how successful that has been. It was $29,000 in revenue the first year and $59,000 this past year. Parking enforcement fees, I'm using $2,645. I did want to let you know grant funds. The only grant funding we received this year was the second half of our ARP funds that came in last July, about a year ago. And then the SRO reimbursement from the county that you approved earlier tonight.
So I'm curious, and maybe this is for the chief, I'm not sure which. We all get complaints all the time about speeders. And I'm always saying, we're writing more tickets than ever. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And
Not just.
you don't have to be real specific, just to verify I'm telling the truth.
We are writing more tickets and more warnings than we have in previous, combined with warnings as well.
Good, that works for me. Thank you. Didn't mean to interrupt, Tanya.
Those revenues do not come to us. For speeding tickets, the only revenue we collect is for parking tickets.
Only Chief Davis.
So it actually costs us money to write tickets. It's a loss. It's, in a business world, it's a loss.
That doesn't mean we
That goes
shouldn't
to
do
the
it.
state and to the court system. We don't, as Tanya said, we don't get any money.
Finally, the last few pages of your agenda are I'm required to, on a quarterly basis, provide you information on our capital projects. We've got the 3 capital projects, the recreation center and the 2 water, the water treatment plant expansion and the water resiliency project. And you'll see we do have a little bit of activity in each of those funds, mostly of the early engineering fees. And then the other requirement on a quarterly basis is to provide you information on the ARP grant fund, which remains unchanged.
Any questions for the finance director?
Yes. Did we get our raise this month?
Yes.
Thank you.
You should have already seen that.
I'm sure I did, but I just filed it.
You spent it already, man.
Coffee. So maybe related to this, but we passed the budget on the community center and the recreation. So are we rocking and rolling now on that bid and moving ahead? Okay,
Yes.
great.
Will it be done before we leave office?
Yes, it will.
Thank you.
We're actually at the point now where we're negotiating with the company to see what we can work down on this cost.
Yeah, I mean, you're not gonna have to put up with the 2 of us for very much longer.
It'll be Nagel Crooks.
All right, is there any other item that need to come before this board this evening? Seeing none, we're adjourned.